Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and good welcome to this Sunday, the 13th of June, 2021. Thank you for tuning in. This is your Sunday show, guys. Listen, I'm going to make a prediction today. It's going to seem kind of shocking. But it's all there. It's all in place for it to come true. Now, you remember back a couple years ago, I was predicting that the homeless situation in America would increase by a lot. I was right on the money. And I made a prediction not that long ago that we would enter into a period of inflation right now, when an awful lot of these other economists were saying that we were going to have a great deflation. I was calling for a recovery when an awful lot of these economists out there were saying, hey, we're going to have a 90% or 80% correction in the stock market and we're going into the next Great Depression. And they were referring to a Great Depression that's deflationary. I said, no, we're going to pick up from this. I also said that this recovery was not going to be real strong, but it was going to spur inflation. Right on the money, guys. So this next prediction is going to be kind of shocking. That's going to come out of me right now. And you guys, when you hear me say it, you're going to think to yourself, hey, that's a very distinct possibility that could actually happen. Because it's set up for it. First thing I want to preface this, I want to say that this generation of people that we have out there, I'm not going to call it a silver spoon in their mouth, but, they've grown up and if they want a hamburger, they just go get a hamburger. Anything they want. It's at their fingertips. They got cell phones and they got debit cards and they've grown up cushy. Let's face it. We've been on a credit binge for the last 30 years or so. And what that's done is we're spending money into the future. And of course, it's made a whole generation of people out here. They're unthankful. They don't have a lot of, what could I say? You have to be careful how you talk to them. They're high strung. An awful lot of them are on medication or meds. It's just a ridiculous society that we have now, where everybody's looking for quick, instant gratification. So we have that backdrop working against what might happen here. We're headed into our hyperinflation, guys. And what this means is it means that for basic people out there, for the average Joe, there's going to be a squeeze. Because prices are going to go up on everything faster than you can pay the price of everything, As that squeeze hits, it's going to cause interesting things to happen, I'm expecting social unrest. Because when you take that silver spoon away, what does the baby do? He cries, squeals. If it's a little child, he holds his breath. He mad. You ever seen one of these little kids in the grocery store, hauling things off the shelves and going into a temper tantrum? Well, look at this as a mass temper tantrum. And it's going to break out in certain areas. We have seen the beginnings of this during the COVID crisis. You've all seen the pictures of the cities. With people marching through the streets and fires burning and whatever, We've all seen this. But it went away. When the hyperinflation hits, even these social programs are just not going to be able to keep up. Social Security's not going to keep up. And what's going to happen is it's going to yield an anger that's going to come from the people. They suppress this anger by sending the people stimmies all the way through this. But what happens when the price of things goes up faster than the stimmies can keep up with it, faster than universal basic income can keep up with it, faster than Social Security can keep up with it. Well, even if the money coming in is not equal to the money going out, people start to have to suffer. When people have to suffer, when it gets right down to the point where it's difficult for them to feed themselves, that's when their anger really arises. Plus, the system, infrastructurally speaking, it needs an overhaul, the whole thing. The electrical grids out there, you know, they are so vulnerable. Well, we all saw what happened in Texas during the ice thing that came in, and also they're vulnerable to cyber things. You know, they've made themselves vulnerable to this. They've put in these new systems where everything's connected to the internet. You know, I'll use cash registers as the perfect example. You know, I went out to the scrapyard where they have scrap steel and stuff and saw a big old cash register. It was all smashed. They'd smashed it with a hammer for the steel that was inside it. And, you know, I took a good look at what was left of it. You know, I mean, okay, it was been trashed. You know, somebody hit it with a sledgehammer a few times, but the buttons were all still there, and the ding drawer, and the little glass up at the top where the price would come up, and all the prices on the different buttons and stuff, you know. And you didn't even need to plug the thing in. Didn't even require electricity. Operated off of manually, off of the buttons, and you turned the handle to open up the crank, to open up the cash drawer. Now think how valuable that would be to keep trade and commerce going if we didn't have electricity anymore. But no, they smash it all up and throw it out. That's what they did with all of them. Then they brought in the plug-in ones. You know, you plug them into the wall, and it operates off of motors and stuff inside it, you know. Made it a little bit easier for the cash register person. They didn't have to pull a crank handle or anything. Then later, they started bringing in ones that are hooked up to the scanners. Now, the scanners are hooked up to the internet. And what this basically means is you can't offer a transaction unless the internet's up and running and the power grid's up and running. It was bad enough they just made one thing that was like would stall you from making transactions, which was the power grid. That was the first registers. They had to have power. I mean, a person could still open their store and still sell stuff if they had a generator to run the cash register. But now it's dependent on the internet too, and dependent on the scanner and everything else. What they're doing is they're doing the same thing on the power grid. They're doing the same thing on the pipeline system that runs the gas and brings the gas in for you, you know, and everything. And this is proven. And the fact that we had so much trouble in the last weeks, you know, meat delivery, you know, they were hit, and they've integrated to internet operations as well. Went all hog into all of this. So here's my prediction about what's going to happen. As the hyperinflation gets really bad, we're going to have areas of the grid go down. How the big question mark right now, like what happened in Texas, but the big question mark in my mind right now is, how big are these areas going to be? Maybe they'll be the size of just one county, and you only have to travel 30 miles to get out of an area where the internet's down. You know, when I just said that, that's an unusual thought for you guys. Have to travel to get out of a grid down area, because you're used to sitting there and waiting until the grid comes back on. Now I'm going to run an unusual thought by you guys that you haven't thought about. In this case, it might be different. It might be you might want to travel out of the area where the grid's down. And the reason why is because of the social unrest, because of the people, the way they are now and everything. When the grid goes down, it might not come back on in that particular area. Ever. Because the people might be just too riled, let's call it riled, to get the grid back on. They might start sabotaging infrastructure so that it's impossible to get the grid back on. So my big question mark is, how big will these areas be? Well, you know, I'm thinking to myself that it's going to be somewhere between 20% and 60% of the total landmass is going to have at least spotty grid down outages, of grid down and telecommunications down in those areas. And, you know, the way society is disintegrating. Now, I'm looking forward a couple years now, you know. It's all about timing, too. I might be off by a little bit on my timing and when this is exactly going to happen, but this is what I'm expecting. Grid down areas and grid up areas. And what I'm expecting is, I'm expecting that when they get a grid down area that they just cannot restore. Because they go in, they try to restore, and they meet up with, well, what do you want to call it, gorilla or not gorillas, but they come across people who are unwilling to allow the in other words, a lawless area. It becomes a lawless area, basically. Because once the grid goes down for more than a week, that whole region will become a lawless area. It'll become the badlands. That's the best way to put it. It'll become the badlands. And if they go in and try to restore grid to that area, they might actually offer resistance to having the grid restored. It might become impossible for them to restore the grid to particular areas. And the big question mark to me is, when's this going to happen? Because this is what we're headed toward eventually. Also, there's another thing you have to consider. When the grid is down in these areas and they can't get it back restored again because of decaying infrastructure and societal problems, they're probably going to fence off those regions from the grid, the areas that have grid. They may even put a border in. They probably will put a border in. And nobody that's in the badlands areas will be able to travel into the grid areas where they have grid, if you've been in the badland regions too long. And this is probably something that you guys have never thought of before, but whole regions of the country that could be quite large. They might be small, and they might be large. I'm just not exactly sure, but I'm thinking they might be quite large. If you get trapped in one of these regions, you might have to travel quite a long ways to find an area where the grid is up and running. Basically, what it really amounts to is society now is in decay. And the powers that be are going to try to maintain power, but I don't think they're going to be able to cover every region or every area, because it's fraying. I used the analogy several shows ago. It's like a pair of jeans, you know, that gets holes in it. And it comes all of a sudden, you know. You see the fabric getting thinner in certain areas, and then all of a sudden, boom, holes. That's the way with this. At a certain point, we're just going to see holes break. And in these regions, you're going to get the badlands, which is going to be whole regions where grid down. No telecommunications in there and everything. And there's going to be people in there. People that's living in these regions. But there's going to be no law and order. What this is going to lead to is a population reduction in the areas where there's no law and order and there's no power, no telecommunications. People are going to flee out of there at first. And later, you're going to find that there's going to be people who are going to stay. Time is going to pass like that before they block off those regions and they don't allow the... Basically, what I'm saying is I think new borders are going to form between the badlands and the areas that have power and infrastructure and have everything else going on. So we're going to have a more highly advanced technological society. See, I'm looking out a few years is what I'm doing, guys, when I'm telling you this show. I'm not talking about this coming next year. I'm talking about we're working into this over the next several years. It might take before this actually happens and we have regions that are cut off, like badlands type of regions, and then regions where you have, where maybe you'll go on the other side of a fence. There might be a border patrol there. You go on the other side of the fence and there's power and everybody's talking on their cell phones and they're on the internet and they're surfing the web or whatever, and they're driving around in their Lamborghinis and whatever on one side of the fence. And on the other side of the fence, you got a guy over there that looks more like Mad Max on the other side of the fence. This is what we're heading toward because of the decay and the fall and collapse of Western civilization. This is the collapse of the Western civilization. We're in it right now. It's moving at a very rapid pace. And I'm just trying to see ahead exactly what might happen. So you know, you might want to prepare for this. I mean, an awful lot of preppers out there, they focus on their home as the be-all and end-all of their preparations. So they have their basement all full of food and they have everything all there, their home. And they have their protection and whatever they need, and all their food and water and drink-making machines and everything you can think of right there at their home. But what if we get this type of collapse where an area goes down and their home is located in the middle of one of these areas? So the power and grid goes down. They're going to be in the SHFT in the middle of it. 200 miles away, there might not be any SHFT at all. The grid's on, the power's on, they're pumping gas, people are out there paying money, people are working still and everything else just 200 miles away. And this guy, he's over here and he's in one of these areas that's the grid's down and everything, and it's more like Mad Max. But he's prepared his house and everything, and so he's in that house and everything. So then you're faced with a tricky question. Do I stay in this area where the grid's down and maybe never coming back on? Or do I pick up and head toward the area over there 200 miles away where they still got lights and power and they still got a modern society and everything else with money and everything else? Or do I stay over here where all they have is barter town and black market and just like the movie Mad Max, you know, Beyond Thunderdome, barter town and you know, do I stay in this area and try to fight it out and eke out a living here where the only money maybe is silver or gold and there's no law and there's no power and there's no telecommunications? Do I stay here? And if you stay in that region too long, years maybe, it might take several years, 3, 4, 5, who knows how long, they might put up a border between you and the area that's got the power. And they might say, hey, you ain't coming in here. Say, well, can't I get a visa or something? No, sorry, you're in the badlands. You ain't coming in. You're not welcome to cross this fence. But you guys got power. You guys got lights. You guys got the internet. You guys got television, everything else. No, sorry, you live in the badlands now. It might take a few years before that happens that way. But things like this do happen with the decay of the Western civilization. And why is this Western civilization decaying? Because we got a problem with the money that's not going to go away. And not going to go away easily. There's no easy answer for this. Our money is corrupted. Our money is based on debt. The real corruption comes from the point that when they create the money, what we call money, which is actually currency, when they create the currency units, there's already a debt attached to them. So say they create $1 and say there's 1% interest per year. So in the first year, that dollar actually owes $1.01. But they only created the dollar. They didn't create the 1 cent to pay off the debt. Now, the debt is accruing. What that means is year after year, the interest piles up on the outstanding debt. So they have to keep creating more and more debt to try to pay the interest. At a certain point, it gets out of control, and we're at that point now, where they cannot raise interest rates because they can't service that debt any longer. And we're at that point now. Then things get really crazy. And we're at that point where things get really crazy. And there's no way out of this situation other than some sort of a restructuring, which causes a monster of a problem as well. You just can't restructure the world and expect it not to cause insolvency problems and stuff. It's a mess, guys. It's a total mess. And I want you to watch a clip I put on, and I'm going to put up the link in the description, of Peter Schiff. And he's right on the money, you know. Thank you guys for listening to this Sunday show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye-bye.